My name's Ryan Shelton. I'm a co-host on the Imperfects, the Jewish grandson of Austrian and English immigrants. And I grew up on and am now currently living on Wurundjeri country. I'd like to recognise the traditional peoples of this continent whose land was stolen nearly 250 years ago. In particular, we at the Imperfects would like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation as the traditional owners of the land on which this podcast was recorded, and we extend our respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. The rich storytelling history of the world's oldest living culture is what we proudly pay homage to when we share stories on the Imperfects.
We're all imperfect, and on this podcast, I'll be chatting with a variety of interesting people who are willing to make themselves vulnerable by sharing their own struggles and imperfections.
Then we'll discuss the invaluable takeaways we can all apply to our own imperfect lives.
I'm Hugh Van Kylenberg from the Resilience Project.
And I'm Ryan Shelton from my mum.
And I'm Josh from Hugh's mum.
And this is the Imperfects. I am desperate to know what just popped into your head, Hugh, because you just had a giggle.
Well, what popped into my head just then was, is it obvious that I'm wearing my pyjama top? That's what popped into my head.
It wasn't, but now...
It does look softer than a normal T-shirt.
Yeah, now all I can think about is you in that T-shirt in bed.
Well, I hope it's a pleasant thought.
It is pleasant. Very pleasant. Very
Yes.
pleasant. Good to see you guys.
Likewise. I think it needs clarification. I've come straight from the airport and I packed very lightly so I could do it quick in and out at the airport.
Wow, that is light. Not even enough room for a T-shirt.
No, pretty much.
Wow.
Pretty much. And so...
God, just a little satchel.
I wanted to just stroll through with absolutely nothing, raw dogging it, as we've called it before.
Have we called it on air?
No, not on air, just off air.
Can you clarify what raw dogging is?
Well, coincidentally, I saw it on a flight. We'd sat down, the four of us were flying to Adelaide together for our live show, and I got my phone out, and I was on Instagram, and I saw, I think it was the Blessed One, or one of those enormous...
Never heard of the Blessed One.
Oh, have you not?
I have not. I've genuinely never heard of it.
I haven't either.
Change your life forever. Probably the best account there is.
Really?
It's so good. There's like 75 no, that's not true. I was going to say 75.2 million viewers.
So is it just like memes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
That'll change your life forever.
So, anyway,
It's
very
like I
popular.
just said I haven't watched Game of Thrones. It's like, you haven't seen Blessed One?
I'm so surprised you haven't. Anyway, so the Blessed One did a post.
The Blessed One.
It will change your life.
Now I'm just imagining you in bed in that T-shirt scrolling through the Blessed One.
Yeah, I mean, that happens a lot.
Yeah.
Is it a bit weird that we're promoting a social media account?
Well, it's probably weirder that the Resilience Project guy is. Spent years telling us to get off his phones, and here he is curled up in bed, scrolling through.
Scrolling
through the Blessed One.
Yeah.
Whatever that is.
Total sham.
I think the Blessed One is a good exemption. You can do that. That's fine.
Really?
Just
That's fine.
none more.
Yeah, because laughing is good for you. So.
Yeah, nothing unhealthy about that one.
No, I don't think so.
Other
no.
ones are bad. This one's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Anyway, so they did a post and I saw it as we were getting on the plane, but it was simply a picture of a guy on a long haul flight from LA to Sydney, which I believe is 14 hours.
Right.
And it was just a picture of this guy. He didn't know the photo had been taken. It was the person next to him. And it was just him just staring at the seat in front of him. And the comment underneath was, this guy next to me just raw dogging it all the way from LA to Sydney.
That is...
Implying the fact that he had no headphones, he had no phone, he had no iPad, he had no headphones attached to the seat. He was just staring at it. He was raw dogging it. He was raw dogging it.
It's like, it's a real psychopathic level of behavior to do that, because it's sort of like he's like planning a hit when he gets off the plane. It's sort of like a scene in a movie where it's like, I'm going to get that guy, and he's just like just looking at the seat, like planning his revenge for 14 hours and then lands and, well, kills a guy. I don't want to accuse this guy of anything he hasn't done, but sounds like...
I attempted in wearing my pajama top today, it's because I just took one set of clothes to Adelaide, wore the same pair back, and realised before we did this episode I can't wear the same T-shirt. So I just put my pyjamas on and hoped that no one would notice, but now I've brought it up.
Yeah, and you've got your teddy bear here as well. little comfort toy, glass of water. Okay.
Anyway, we should probably get into today's episode
Yes.
because it's an incredible episode with a very good friend of yours.
Christie Whelan Browne, as you know from the title of the episode. But Christie I've known for years. Well, we go into this in the episode, but I mean, this is, like I say in the interview with her, it's like I've wanted to have her on this podcast for years. Never felt like the right time, but I'm just so glad that that she would agree to come on. It was she's amazing, amazing person.
Yeah, we felt it best for context because we kind of jumped straight into the conversation. I think because we're so well aware of what's happened to her in the last few years, we kind of jump straight into the conversation and we don't give too much context. So just before we start, just a bit of background. Christie spoke up about her own Me Too experience, which if you want more info on, you can definitely Google. She was subsequently sued for speaking up, and it's been 5 years of her life now in and out of court fighting that battle.
Yep.
And that's what we spent a bit of time talking about today. We are so grateful she joined us. She's so courageous in doing so and so generous with sharing her story.
Here she is, the brilliant, hilarious, talented, legendary Christie Whelan Browne.
Stand on the corner, hang in the moonlight. You can't take my dreams.
Well, this is... Sorry. Christie's just saying the utter madness of how it works in here. And there's no plan. As Hugh and I look panicked at each other, like, who says something? Like we haven't done 100 episodes of this. So, yes, really feels like a long time coming for me, this chat with you, Christie Whelan Browne. And because I feel like years ago I wanted to ask you to come on the podcast because you seem like just the obvious person to get on this podcast. But I held back because I didn't want to, because of everything that you were going through. I felt like I was like, I didn't want to seem like I was like ambulance chasing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anyway, we don't have to go like full deep now, but, but I just wanted to say that. It was meant
It'd be
to be
great if you did that. We could go for it right now.
It was meant to be said in a lighter fashion, but it sounded really deep as I was in. I was like, geez, we are right into this.
Hey, let's just get into it.
Let's get into it. It's good to see you, Christie.
Yeah, you too. Guys, I am a long-time listener, first-time visitor. I just love this podcast so much. And like what you're doing and putting out to the world is just so helpful to so many people. And I'm very honoured to be a guest. So thanks for having me.
Oh, wow.
Very
You
lovely.
could have been here a lot earlier if Ryan had.
Yeah, summoned the guts to message you and ask you. Actually, when I did ask you, you said, finally.
Yeah, because of like 2 weeks before you asked me, Hugh sent me a voice memo on Instagram and he was like, "Hi Christie, it's Hugh." And he started talking, and my husband, because we love the podcast so much, he looks at me and goes, "This is it. This is it. They're going to ask you." But it was just something else.
It was pointless drill.
So I was like, "Oh, they didn't ask." And then you did.
Yeah, and here we are. So, I mean, I don't really know where to start. There's lots of things to talk about. But I think there's one thing, it's cool because when I first met you was on The Wrong Girl, the show that we were on together. And I first met you when we were doing a table read of the episodes, and we were meeting at some place in
Docklands.
Williamstown. Docklands.
I remember it.
Oh, was it Docklands, was it? Okay. So we were there and I didn't know you and I didn't know a bunch of the people there, and you walked in and you just like dressed to the, like you looked incredible, had like these amazing like clothes on and like these big sunglasses, like, who is this? I was like, who is this person? And then, because I was really nervous because I hadn't done much acting on TV shows like that before. And so I was really a bit intimidated. And then we're doing the read through and then we got to your bit. And you were so funny. So funny. I was like, who the bloody F is that? I've never, like, it was so funny. You were making like very simple, it was, I mean, the script was really good but I was just blown away by how funny you were, like immediately. I was like, well, I hope that we get to do something together one day more than this, because this she's really funny. So that it's kind of cool that then we became friends. And yeah.
I know. Oh, thank you. Do you know this leads me into something that we've been friends. When was that? 2016 or something. We've been friends at that time. And when I distinctly remember when you started following me on Instagram, that whenever I would post something that was like, vulnerable or personal or whatever, I remember thinking, I bet Ryan thinks this is really lame. Only because your content was so based heavily in comedy that I thought that you would think, why is she talking about a bloody dead cat or whatever.
The most vulnerable thing there is.
That was my cat, Britney Spears, who I loved very much. But no, I'm not referring to that. Yeah, and it's just so – I just love that now in listening to this podcast, and especially your stuff where you talked about comedy and where you thought it was going to go, and I really related to that idea that if something didn't go where you thought it was heading in life, that then you were at a loss, And so the idea that if you weren't going to be a comedian or have your own show or go to America or whatever, that was failing, or where do you end up? And now when I listen to the podcast and I'm like, not only making people laugh, but changing people's lives. And it's like, it just is such a great reminder that where we think we're headed or where we're supposed to be headed isn't always where we're going.
Yeah, and it's interesting that, because definitely before this podcast and before I met Hugh, I didn't know how to talk about vulnerable things, because I worried that if I took myself too seriously or took life too seriously, then I wouldn't be seen as a funny person anymore, and I couldn't make silly, funny things, which is what I was all about back then. But now I think because I found like a comfortable way to do it, I know that I can do both. I can still do silly, funny things and still talk about my dead cat. I don't have one.
R.I.P.
R.I.P. fictional dead cat. But yeah, that's really interesting that you would worry about that, because I've got people there are people that I have in my life that I would worry about what I post in the same sort of way. They'll be like, oh God, what is this particular person going to think? Or they're going to think it's lame or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like the filter that you run everything through. But I'm honoured that I was your filter. Oh my God. Jesus.
Yeah, I'm really worried that you were like, loser.
Yeah, good accent. That is my voice.
But even if we got together and I was having a really hard time, I would think that maybe I was making you uncomfortable, like talking about it, or so anyway, it's just like
really? Because you thought that I was like, I don't want to hear any of the hard stuff. Let's just be funny.
Or just that I'm not even sure what it was, or that maybe you saw value in me being funny, or who knows where we come to these conclusions about what people think or expect of us. But yeah, then now hearing this side of you and like, maybe the idea that you wanted to be perceived as funny.
Yeah.
And now I find this part of you so just incredible, and I just love that you found this other side as well. Not that you didn't have it, or maybe you were just afraid to show it, or you found Hugh and you found a way to say it, but yeah, I just feel so happy for you.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Oh, I feel happy for myself too.
That could be the episode. That's lovely. Yeah. Just a quick catch up between friends. That's really nice. Lovely. That's crazy, the assumptions we make and the thought channels that we go down without properly questioning them, or we just make very we're sure of our assumptions as well, that this is the way it is.
Yeah,
without
usually
ever
the worst possible assumptions are the ones that are the strongest.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I've found that since doing this podcast and since talking in this lame way, I find that like more people who I would have assumed would not be interested in this have probably have got in contact with me to talk about certain things that they're struggling with, because they clearly see that I'm okay with it. So they're like, oh, okay, well maybe he's a safe space to be able to talk about it. But I would never have assumed that they would ever want to talk about that stuff, or they would even have anything like that in their brains. I would just assume that they're just comedians just trying to be funny as opposed to have any sort of like insecurities or self-doubt or anything like that. But more and more I realise absolutely everyone does.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, isn't it? Like I feel like for my whole life up until really doing this, I just assumed that everyone else had it figured out to a degree, like most people, the majority, and I was like, why am I the only one going through all this like internal torment and dialogue?
Yeah.
But I think it's the other way around.
Yeah, absolutely.
Basically no one has it.
Well, when I was like 19, I was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome and I was really sick for a couple of years. And when I eventually found this dude who helped me, he sort of really diagnosed a perfectionism like disorder or obsession or whatever, that I had to be perfect or that I had to be seen to be perfect.
Wow.
And so I think at a young age that was pointed out to me. And so then I was much more comfortable being like, I'm not perfect and I'm not trying to be perfect. And I realised that that's also a great way to connect with people. If people think you're perfect or attempting to be perceived as perfect, they won't be open with you. They can't be open with you. So yeah, I think there's something in being a funny person, which Ryan thinks I am.
You absolutely are. I've seen your Britney Spears show. You absolutely are.
There's something about being a funny person and being an open person that invites that in other people to be able to feel free to say, I feel really shit or I feel whatever. And I'm happy to be a person in the world that invites that. Because fuck perfect.
Yeah.
It's so boring.
That
anyway.
was a unused name of the podcast. Fuck perfect. We went with the Imperfects instead, but
Oh well, we all make mistakes.
I'm sitting here nervously waiting to read a bio. Can I do it?
Oh my God.
put him out of his misery.
Is it too late? I feel like I run into this.
No, this is like those episodes of like TV shows when the credits start like 8 minutes after. It's like, hey, what? The credits now?
I just hate reading bios, and anyway, let's do it.
Cool.
Well, actually, no. There's a bit. I'm going to do a bit where I'm not going to read the first paragraph. I'm just going to say it.
You
So-
memorised it.
Well, I've got it. Yeah.
Yes.
Not memorised, but summarised
Okay.
in my head. I was going to drop it in a casual way. So Christie is actually an award-winning singer, dancer, and actress.
That's casual.
Cool.
Did you guys know that?
God, how'd you memorise all that?
He's a real pro.
She's also a mum to her son Duke.
I am.
You are. Yeah. Same to you.
This is super cool and casual, bro. I'm loving this bio.
Yeah. So anyway,
What else you
Christie's.
got?
This is a bit I'm reading, everyone, just so it'll be obvious to everyone in the room.
No, it will be apparent.
Christie's list of stage and screen credits seem endless. On stage, she has been. The way it's written makes it sound like I just said that. On stage, she's been everything from Shane Warne, the musical. You weren't Shane Warne. No. You were in Shane.
You missed a word.
This is why Hugh does the bios.
She was in Shane Warne, the musical. To Xanadu.
Never heard that word.
What are you trying to... Can I say it?
Xanadu.
Oh, Xanadu. Yeah.
I saw that and thought, I'll sort that out before she comes in. To Singing in the Rain, to Shakespeare's The Twelfth Night, and As You Like It, to Oscar Wilde's An Ideal Husband, and The Importance of
was
Being
good.
Earnest, and
that was
Muriel's Wedding, the musical. On the screen, she's appeared in Wonderland, Offspring, Miss Fisher's Murder Mysteries, House Husbands, True Stories with Hamish and Andy, which is, you worked on that as well. Get Crackin' and The Wrong Girl, where she and Ryan first met. There's
Here we
so
are.
much more. I'm not finished. She's also the star of 3 one-woman shows, Britney Spears, The Cabaret, Show People, and Vigil, all of which have debuted at the Adelaide Cabaret Festival and then toured in Australia and internationally. In 2019, Christie joined the cast of Neighbours, as well as joining Sean McCallus' Mad as Hell, where she has appeared in as a regular cast member for the last 4 seasons and is incredible at it, by the way. I added that. I didn't read that. There you go. That's a pretty big bio.
Yeah,
It's a long bio.
that's amazing.
Incredible
How
career.
do you not know how to say Xanadu though?
I haven't seen the word before.
What?
Do you know this? Do you know where it's? Do you know what it's referencing? Oh.
Come on.
Have a guess. What do you think Xanadu is?
Place where nobody dared to go. Olivia Newton-John.
ONJ, babe. No.
Okay.
Get out,
Oh,
you.
well.
That's all right. That's all right. No, we can come back from this.
No, but this is. I'm proud of myself. Do you know why?
Because Xanadu's lame.
No, I'm proud of myself because so often in my life I will just pretend I know what people are talking about when they don't. And I made a pact with myself earlier this year, never again.
Good for you.
And I don't care if I look stupid. I'm just going to go, I have no idea what the fuck people are talking about.
That's good.
And I've spent so much time getting myself into hot water going, oh, yeah. And then I get asked about it and I go, fuck, I'm in trouble here. I don't know what Xanadu is. Probably should have checked before you came in, considering I was going to read about it, but
That's all right.
I don't know what it is.
No. That's all we have. Look it up afterwards. You're in time.
There's a huge chance all this will be edited out. But anyway, I feel like this is late in the episode to welcome you, but welcome to the Imperfects, Christie.
Thank you.
You have just had an incredible career. Like, it's quite extraordinary. You've been through so much. I would love to start talking about how good you are at what you do, because I really feel like, I mean, you said this. I hope you don't mind. In fact, no, can you say it? Because it means more coming from you, what you were saying about how if Christie went.
Oh, yeah. Well, this is like, so our good friend Tom Budge, so we over the years have had like because he was also on, The Wrong Girl, and, we all got along really well, and Tom and I every now and again just talk about how brilliant you are, just like in our own messages, and hope that's okay. But the one thing we've said a couple of times, and I think I thought this after I saw the Britney Spears show, was like, and I might have even messaged you about this, but I was like, she's got to go to America. She's got to go to LA. It's too small here. It's like there's not enough. There's not enough opportunity here. It's like, because there's like, if you went, I believe that if you went to over there, you'd be in, and this was at the time of Britney Spears, but if you went over there, you'd be in like the Judd Apatow movies, you'd be in all these things. And I just firmly believe that as fact, as potential fact. Because I just sort of like, you're it. You've got it. And that's my opinion. I don't mean to like heap praise as if like I know any better than anyone else, but it's like,
So do you have like an in with Judd?
Yeah. Give him a call. Throw a DM.
That's so nice. Thank you. I actually, when we were working on The Wrong Girl, I felt this most deeply, that all that perfect shit that I've already talked about.
This is what you did with Ryan when you first met Ryan. Is that right?
Yeah. But I really struggle being in that environment on a TV show where part of your job is to look beautiful or look a certain way. And I distinctly remember being on The Wrong Girl in the makeup truck and thinking, I hate the feeling of looking in a mirror and thinking my skin needs to be smoother or more whatever, like that's why I loved working on Mad as Hell. The job required you mainly had a blackened out tooth every show or like a horrendous wig or wrinkles or whatever, but much more comfortable in that realm. And I think that's why I've always shied away from America, because the idea is you have to look absolutely perfect with a face that is half manufactured from the shops.
The shops.
The face shop.
Yeah, and being thin to a point that, I like eating too much, So I just know that wouldn't be a good place for me.
Oh, that's really interesting. I mean, that's just me, classic guy. I do not think about it. I just do not think of that because I have the privilege of not having to. But yeah, that is really interesting. Of course, that makes so much sense.
Have you always felt like that, or is that a realization you had sort of at about that point?
That job in particular, I remember thinking, it was so weird. I had long blonde hair, and because Jess Murray, who played the lead, had long blonde hair, they said, we want to cut your hair off and dye it brown. And I sobbed. Like a baby. I realised how much I hide behind my hair and how, I don't know, just how uncomfortable I am on screen.
Yeah, I hate cameras too.
But yeah, like it's so, like there's there's obviously things in life that happen that I remember distinctly moments where people would just be like, "You're ugly," as I was growing up, and so I was just like, "That's fact. I'm ugly." So
As like a kid in school and stuff.
yeah,
Yeah.
or like a guy would say, my friend would say, "What do you think of Christie?" And they go, "Oh, her body's a 10, but like her face is a 2 or whatever." So
Jeez.
it's pretty rough.
People said that.
Yeah, but like
God.
in that way that like kids or teenagers
Yeah.
do or whatever. But I just took it on to be like, cool, I'm ugly. That's the way life is. And so really I think that's why I turn out to be like a funny or I don't know what sort of person I am. But
Because of that belief.
yeah.
Yeah.
But that is very hard to shake. If you grow up with that and then your job becomes playing a beautiful person or having to look beautiful, there's a horrible pressure in that feels terrible to have to sit, for 2 hours looking at yourself at 6 a.m, being like, I have to look. And funnily enough, when I was doing the wrong girl, I thought, oh, you look like shit. You're disgusting. I look back, I'm like, you looked great. Like it's all in hindsight. I'm happy to be like, you looked fine, but it's always in the moment. It's fucked.
Well, that and in the added pressure on top of being just a woman on a Channel 10, big glitzy dramedy. You're also, your role was like as a TV host, for part of it at least. You were like this, like on screen. So it was like a double pressure,
Yeah.
almost. So it's like you're on a TV show as a character, but that character has to also be perfect looking.
Yeah.
So it's
Double.
double pressure.
Yeah,
Does that pressure, is that different for on stage as opposed to on screen?
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. On stage, I feel much more comfortable. Maybe there's a more distance from the
Yeah.
audience, but also I don't feel like your job on stage is to be perfect. Even though a lot of the characters I play have been ingenues or glamorous or whatever, you get given a wig and you're sort of hiding, whereas screen
Yeah.
is much more exposing and yeah, you just can't hide.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Do you have a thing you look back on and go, that's my favourite thing that I've done professionally?
Funnily enough, I loved doing that episode of True Story so much.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I met Jess, who's our mutual friend. We played
Jess Harris, yeah.
Kazza and Shazza, and she's become one of my most dearest friends. And I laughed so hard with her that day that we both left with like a throbbing headache from cry laughing all day. It was the most insane.
I remember that. I remember thinking, because I was on set, and I remember thinking I was excited for you two to meet, because I was like, this is going to go well.
Yeah.
This is going to be good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that job in itself, like the way we dressed up, the story we told, but also taking away and having you there and Hamish and taking Jess away as like a lifetime gift. It's like, that's got to be up there.
That's really interesting. So one of the highlights was it was more about the people than the actual work. Is that?
Don't even remember the cameras rolling, but like we were just having the best day in this backyard dressed in 80s, it was probably like the feeling of going to a party and meeting friends, which I never actually do in my real life.
Well, yeah, because it was this backyard barbecue scene. And there was a huge cast of people. It really did kind of at times feel like this big barbecue of just friends that could just hang out.
Yeah.
And you and Jess are just behind the food table. And then there's that one point where you went to eat the potato salad and the props department comes sprinting over like, no. Because like had been sitting there for 8 days.
Because she's gotten too relaxed into the backyard thing.
I'll do anything for a gag. What's that? Mayonnaise? Give it.
Yeah, that was fun. That was really, really fun. So then everything's gone great. Like, everything's like flying, you're in these shows and then the Me Too movement happens around the world, and it's just this incredible, empowering thing that is just like changing the world. I mean, but particularly the entertainment industry, like and like all of a sudden I saw like all these, women and my girlfriend included, like would just putting on Twitter or Facebook, whatever, just hashtag Me Too, and I was like, what is Me Too? And then I learnt more about it, and then you came forward and you talked about your own experience and your own Me Too experience, which really, I mean, I have no idea if you knew what it would lead to, or what the stuff you would have to then go through. But do you mind just talking a bit about that, even just that decision, because that's a really, really big decision, I think, and brave decision to make the decision to go like, I'm going to talk about my experience.
Yeah. Well, initially when everyone was just putting the hashtag Me Too, I put one as well. And I had people in my friendship circle knew the experience that I'd had on that particular show, but I never considered it a Me Too moment, before that. And even when I tweeted Me Too, I still was just like, I've experienced something like that. But I'd never really looked at it or understood it until I was reading about Weinstein, and I remember afterwards I just had this racing heart and I didn't understand it, and I would get through my day and I would lay down my head at night and there it was, and I was thinking, shit, like, so I went to the doctor to get my heart checked and they're like, it's fine, maybe you should see a therapist. So I did, and in seeing this therapist we unlocked that the racing heart was due to the hashtags that were going around on Twitter. And so I had to sort of unpack that with the therapist. And in doing that, I messaged some other women who were on the show with me, and I had never done that before. We none of us had really.
And this was a live stage show that you were doing, yeah.
Yeah, in 2014 I did the Rocky Horror Show, and there were 5 women in the show, and I messaged one of them who we hadn't been close on the show, but I just said, I'm having these feelings. I don't know if you are, but I'm just reaching out to see if you're okay. And she called me straight away and she was like, I had no idea you were going through that, and I'd spoken to another couple of girls in the show, which was such news to me. I had no idea that at the time they'd all discussed it, and I felt very alone in my experience. So to have them, to hear that had happened to them was a relief in some ways, not that it had happened to them, but that I wasn't alone. And so we started chatting, and really it was just, therapeutic. It wasn't for any, to speak out, but the timing was that the Rocky Horror Show was starting up again that month. Mm-hmm. That's how the timing worked. It wasn't conscious. It just, that's how I was talking to a therapist. She, unlocked this. I spoke to my friends, and then it happened that the show was opening. So we knew that there were a new group of women in that same firing line that we were in. So we decided to write a legal letter to the company that was producing the show, and all we asked them to do was investigate this behaviour that we outlined, and they refused. And we went back again. I think there was about 4 back and forths asking them to, and outlining the very serious behaviour that we were talking about, and they refused. So then...
It must have been so just...
Infuriating.
Yeah.
Well, I don't even know how... I think I'm a very stubborn person, and the worst thing you could do to me is to say that no. And they even threatened to sue if we said anything further. So that, to me, it was like, I hate injustice, and I hate people using their power against people less powerful. So, the idea to come forward with the media, that was, we were backed into a corner. It was that, or the show went on, and these 5 other women were in that same situation. So that wasn't an option for me. But people have a huge issue with trial by media. They really find that unfair. they think that it takes it out of the hands of the law or the, whatever, which I get it. I get that. But sometimes you're not left with any choice.
Mm-hmm.
And if I had any other choice, I promise you, being on live TV crying about what had happened to me was not my ideal way to deal with it. But that was the only choice. If we wanted to stop that behaviour in its tracks, that was it.
I think people really, you've explained this beautifully, but I think it is really important just to highlight that what you're then doing is going to the media is a purely selfless act. It's like there's so much criticism when people, particularly women, when they come out and speak out about something like this, is that it is a grab for attention or money. And
I promise you there's no money. I promise you there's attention for sure, and it's not positive, but there's no money.
And I think because I spoke to you a few times throughout just those times and that first year or so, and I saw how draining and how painful and hard that process was. Even though you probably weren't to know what the process would be at the start, but at the start, I think it's just very important for people to understand how selfless that act is. There's nothing. It's nothing about your own interests, and I know it's like you can't really say that, but it's obvious to me, but it isn't obvious to everyone. And I just wanted to make that very, very clear. How, of course, brave, but more importantly, selfless. You are only acting in the interests of these 5 women who are about to do the show.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I go back a step to, because I found it fascinating how you sounded like you'd sort of categorised it in your brain as something else for a long period of time.
Yeah. In my case, there was a lot of, and in the case of a lot of people who experience this sort of behaviour, I blamed myself, and I was scared to tell my husband because I couldn't imagine him understanding that I hadn't invited that behaviour.
Oh, right.
Because it was so brazen and, I just imagined if I told Rowan, he would be like, well, did you say don't do that? And the answer would have had to be no, I didn't. My physicality said that, but yeah, those things you don't learn about trauma until later, that you either file them somewhere or I didn't even categorise what happened to me. It was just what happened on that show, and that show was toxic, and that was a really shit time.
Yeah.
And especially finding out about the other women. I think finally I got to say, that wasn't my fault. I think there'd been a lot of self-blame up until that point, which is very common. You'll often hear women talk about something horrible that happened to them and them saying, but I guess, I was in that place, or I was drinking, or, we blame ourselves for things that we shouldn't.
When you made the decision, or the group of women and yourself made the decision that, all right, we're backed into a corner, this is what we're going to do, was the awfulness of what you were going to have to go through to do that, had you considered that, or how much did you
that really interests me as well, as far as, did you know how much of
the bullshit you'd have to put up with?
No, I didn't. I knew because the women, we'd all been sending messages, I knew the exact headspace I was in. I knew that they would say I'd worked with him again on The Wrong Girl, and I knew they would say there would be footage of us laughing and being friendly, and I knew that would be used against me, but I was not prepared for rape and death threats on my Twitter, that really, people I want to hold your head underwater until you stop breathing. It wasn't even until then that I learned how angry people are at a woman standing up and saying, this shouldn't have happened to me. It makes people really angry. And not only men, it makes other women very angry. And sometimes these women who abuse you online are saying, "Oh, we all put up with that, so just shut it." It's like, well, I'm sorry that you are okay with shutting it, but if we continue to shut it, the next generation, it was just madness to me that other women would also want you to shut up.
I just find it astonishing because I just don't think I could do it as far as what you did to speak up, to publicly. I think if I was ever to be able to talk like that publicly and go through that process, I think the amount of abuse that you put up with during that, I'll be like, okay, well, that's it. I'm out after that because that's too much. It was too much, like what you put up with and had to endure from like whether it was in like the courtroom or online or whatever. Like it's too much for anyone to have to endure. It's brutal.
I remember. So I'm the baby of my family, but I'm sort of like not the baby, and especially to my parents, I feel like it's hard to explain, but I'm not really a baby, I feel like
you're a grown woman.
Yeah, but
I don't think anyone was under the illusion that we're talking to a baby.
I've got a baby at home and you're nothing like him. Nothing like him.
But thank you for clarifying. Yeah.
I'm clearly not putting this in the right way. But anyway, my parents were staying with me and I was cooking them dinner. And I never watched the news, but my dad had the news on and I got the text from one of the journalists who was part of the story, and she said he's suing for defamation. And I sort of saw the text and I thought, oh, well, they said that was a possibility, went on with cooking dinner. And then I heard my name on the TV in my living room and went around the corner and just saw, pictures of me, horrendous pictures of me backstage just mucking around with friends. But they were sort of like bawdy photos or whatever. And it said, notoriously foul-mouthed person, sexual deviant. My parents were watching the screen and I saw them look to me like, make this okay, and I was like, I can't. Like I was in such shock. So that's how I found out I was being sued. It was on the 5 o'clock news or whatever. And
so your character's being attacked essentially.
That's right. And to my parents, who they were describing was just so far from who they knew and who I think I am, but the story they were telling and the pictures matched up to the story. And yeah, that's a real that was a moment, because my life was being like, I don't know, shot at. And my parents were looking at me and I didn't want to disappoint them or I was ashamed of what they were having to endure looking at this as well. Like that was absolutely brutal. So that was one of the worst moments. And
because there's something about maybe the generation above us where it's like the news means something.
Yeah.
Like the television news. Like even though it's like their daughter, there is still an element of like, well, if the news is saying so, then this must be this is true. So hang on, what are you not telling us, or what's going on here?
You're exactly right. And like I don't read the news, but they were staying with me. So we had the news on the telly, had the wireless going with the 3AW, talk back and the newspaper.
I'm sure they were kind.
Yeah. Well, it was just, I was like, I would never, these outlets would never be part of my life. But you're right.
I know that even if I've ever done anything, it matters more if it's in like like, one of my crowning achievements was being in the Jewish news. Like that was like a huge moment for the family.
Mazel tov.
Thank you. If I knew how to say thank you in Hebrew, I would have. But yeah, it's that must have been like really, because you're sort of up against like this machine of just the media.
Yeah.
Okay, so that would have been horrific.
Well, what happens to your emotional state at that time? How's your mental health? Well, I can't even begin to imagine. I feel like your nervous system would just be completely shot.
Absolutely. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. My mental health, I didn't understand how to continue existing. I was never certain that the going to the media was the right choice. It was just the only choice I was left with. And I was never entirely sure that of a lot of things. But what I was sure of was like, I never wanted to hurt anyone. I never wanted to ruin anyone's life. I just wanted to do the right thing by another group of women. So that was the one pure thing that kept me going in all the really dark shit times, was like that kept me afloat.
It sort of strikes me that and maybe I'm speaking outside of my lane too much here. I'll try and put it in terms that are just purely personal to me, but rather than on behalf of other people. But it strikes me that as a woman speaking out, there's so many points along the way that undermine you as a woman that I wouldn't have to go through as a man. Like the fact that you said before, the immediate thought that you were sort of conditioned in through culturally is, did I bring this on myself? Like, was this my fault in the beginning? And then, well, you get past that to a point where you're like, no, I'm going to say something, and then it's being attacked for your character. And there's all but I was just sort of thinking when you guys have both brought this up, I just thought it was warranted mentioning that if either one of us were to bring something up, none of those, we wouldn't have to cross any of those bridges.
No.
Like, yeah, it's just, and then
There'd definitely be no thought of like, did I bring this on myself? I wouldn't question that. I wouldn't have that conditioning that, well, it might have been my fault. Maybe I was a bit too flirtatious in that moment, and maybe I've sent mixed messages. I don't think as a man you would go through that. I don't think that process would take place. I don't think.
Yeah, and maybe there'd be, I guess it's all case dependent on what you're talking about, but maybe there would be, depending on who and what, there would be attacks on your character. But I feel like there's just so many points in the story that serve to reinforce the original power dynamic that was the cause of it in the first place.
And just that the legal system is set up in such a way. Like, I remember that when I got, assigned a lawyer from the media outlets, and this lawyer has now become a very good friend. We've spent 5 years working together. But she was like, I'm going to need all your texts and I thought, show me one person who has a phone that doesn't have something in there that makes them look bad or like a bad person, or
if presented in a specific context. Yeah.
So holding on to who I was really hard, because they were being so adamant about who I was, and it felt very far. Like even going, was I too flirtatious or whatever? I'm not a flirtatious person, so I knew it wasn't that. There were certain things I knew for sure, but I am stupid and like to make people laugh and in
playful.
Playful. So that was being reconfigured to being this other person who even if that was who I was, a sexual deviant, that still shouldn't have been a good reason as to why this happened. But it wasn't who I was. So I had to work really hard to hold on to who I was, which is a horrible thing. You know, we spend our whole lives building up this person and cutting away shit and dealing with stuff, and then I don't know, this picture's painted of you and it's like that's not me. But the picture was everywhere. It was really.
And that all of a sudden then becomes like, you know, that out of all the things you've done, the most attention goes on this particular image of you that's being like propaganded across news services.
Yeah.
And then, and it's like, it's so criminal because, first of all, because it's just not true and it's twisting the truth and with the intention of presenting like a case that they can win. Like that's the whole point of it. I don't think it's personal in the way I look at it. It doesn't feel personal like the way my perception of it is. It might feel different for you, but to me, I'm just like, that is a brutal way to win, to try and win.
And it did feel personal to me.
It did.
Because, you know, as you say, I felt at the time that what happened was my fault or just a weird toxic situation, and then I realised I wasn't alone. So finally I felt that, okay, it wasn't me and I've got these allies. And then he's like, no, just you still. You know, so again, I was alone and being made to feel like it was my fault. So it was the same pattern as like re-traumatization that what happened in 2014 happened again and continued to happen. That case went on for 4 years of my life.
Throughout it, I remember feeling like my own, like inserting myself into the story, I felt like my own amount of guilt because I remember specifically if like an article came out about it and I remember feeling like, oh my God, Christie's still in that. Like I'm living my life, I'm doing whatever I'm doing and having fun, whatever. And then just that remembering, it's like, you were in court being screamed at for a whole week. And I just.
And you were just bloody looking at your smug phone.
Yeah, I was having a ball playing Angry Birds. But I felt really guilty about that because, I felt guilty, but I also felt like it put it in perspective. I was like, oh my God, like what you were going through. And I don't mean to, of course I defend you till the cows come home because we're friends and I know you and I love you, but I certainly don't want this episode to sound like it's this, you know, putting, you know, like staking our claim on what we, you know, but I remember thinking that is really unfair that someone, this is really oversimplifying it, but kind of not as well, someone who's just trying to do the right thing and protect these women now has to spend years turning their life upside down, being completely judged, threatened. I just remember thinking, this is really fucked that this is happening. And it's like...
And continues to be.
And continues to. But I know that's a really obvious thing to say. Of course it's fucked. But I just remember thinking that very specifically when I was like, oh my God, maybe someone told me that like it's, you know, Christie's in court this week and I was like, oh my God, of course that's this week. And it just sort of reminds me that like this has been your sole focus for years. The rest of us get to go off and like live our lives and do whatever. And you're in there like fighting for, not for you, fighting for these women and then probably, not to sound over dramatic, but honestly, for probably millions of women after it, I would say. The knock-on effect.
I always look at Brittany Higgins and I think like people must look at what she endures in terms of abuse and media and like it's horrendous. And I often will message her just to say, I'm not putting myself in the same basket as her. I'm just saying I message her to say, what you've done makes a difference, because sometimes you can forget that this is what it takes. This is what it's taken forever since the first woman was like, I want a job, or I want my own bank account. Or, you know, women have been busting balls forever to try and be heard and be respected, and it just, you have to keep chipping away. And sadly, years and years and years of punishment for standing up doesn't seem just, but you know, if I did know then what I know now, I wouldn't have changed it.
You would have done it.
Yeah.
Amazing.
We've obviously just met today, but I can tell that the stuff that you called stupid before, the like playful being stupid, the playful fun part of you is one of the things that makes you as brilliant as you are. Was there ever a point when it was being misconstrued that you found yourself sort of questioning that part of your personality?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it was all used to describe me. And I was like, these words do describe me, but not in the way they're being used. So it was sort of like confusing, and like a notoriously foul-mouthed person. I love swearing. Like I do. I swear a lot, but I never swear in front of my parents. So my mum's like, I've never heard you say F. And I was like, Mum, I swear. You know, like it was like I say I'm not the baby of my family. I'm the baby in some ways. So for my mum, I had to sit at my kitchen bench and say, Mum, I swear. And I've said the C word. You know, she's like, you would never say this, what they've said. I was like, Mum, I've said it. So it was like it was good in a way, because I had to sort of own parts of me that maybe I hid from my family.
What a ridiculous process to find yourself in, to go, like, some person's job is to go, we need to make her look like she swears, so maybe if she swears, then that's the kind of person who maybe deserves this. I don't know. That's the kind of narrative they're pushing now. It's just extraordinary.
Yeah, that was what was so confusing about it. It's like, what does all this equate? Even if I am this person you're painting, what does that mean?
Yeah, is that okay?
Does that change anything?
Yeah.
Does that mean by swearing, does that send a message to someone, hey, you can do this to me because I swear a lot?
I think the point being made was that how could I be offended when I'm so vile myself? But yeah, that playful side of me, like, I love that side, and I didn't want to lose it. And I found people around me after that, you know, if I worked with them, being like, hello, Christie, it's very good to see you today, you know. And I'm like, guys, I still want to have a good time, and I can still have a joke, and, you know. But yeah, they didn't add up.
I did actually want to ask about that, but I didn't know if you'd want to talk about it. But did people's behaviour around you professionally change?
I think I worked really hard to try and remain. Magda Szubanski actually went on like Sunrise or some show after it happened, and they asked her about it because she's my friend, and she said she described me as unshockable because that's sort of who I am. I can still, you could say any filthy joke to me, or, you know, muck around and tell me something personal. I'm not going to be offended. I'm not easily offended. So I wanted to let people know that's still who I am. And I tried really hard to remain that way, and to remain fun-loving. And that's part of, as we're talking about true story, it's part of the reason I love being an actor. We have fun. We get paid to have fun. So, I tried really hard to remain who I was and to hold on to who that was, and that was tricky, but also to not be destroyed. I refused to be destroyed. There were days, trust me, I did not want to get up and go to work. I had to be on stage, you know, very exposed in front of audiences, knowing that everyone knew where I was. If someone wanted to find me and hurt me, they knew where to find me 6 nights a week. So that was, you know, I didn't want to show up and talk about resilience. I didn't want to keep going. But if I didn't, I was sending the message that if you speak up, they'll destroy you. So don't. So I felt that pressure to keep going, or you're not only fucking it up for, women who are looking to you for power, but also just for myself. I wasn't going to, as I said, I'm very stubborn. I wasn't going to let that ruin me. As I said before, I never wanted to hurt anyone. I never wanted to ruin anyone's life, but it felt like someone wanted to ruin mine. And the stubborn part of me was like, well, you're not fucking going to.
Do you mind because I remember meeting up with you and you were sort of talking to me about, and I remember bits and pieces of it, but I think it's kind of important if you're comfy talking about it. But the way that they tried to destroy you, I remember thinking like how scary that felt to me when you were recounting it to me, like being literally on the stand. To me, it sounded like a film. I was like, this surely doesn't happen in real life, that kind of like lawyer going at you. Do you mind talking about like what that is like? Because these are all parts of these are the things that you've had to endure and that have affected, and I think it's all contextual. Do you mind talking about what that was like?
Yeah. This is the criminal trial. And his barrister was a very, very aggressive barrister, and it began with him saying, you describe him in this way, but you are this way. And I was like, no, I'm not. And he just pulled out a binder he said, this is full, like I'm talking like a thick. He's like, this is full of images and messages and things that you have done to prove that is who you are. And the first picture he showed me was a picture I'd never seen before. It was me backstage in a musical when I was 23 years old. I'd never seen it, didn't know the context of it, but it didn't look good, I'll be honest. And my heart I was like, what is that? And again, all those things rush through. This photo shows who you are. This photo proves why someone may have behaved in a certain way with you.
It's just like a movie. That's just like you said to me. That feels like a movie, yeah.
But then it ended. It was like right near the end of the day. I'd actually come in on, say, the Wednesday and waited all day and they didn't get to me. So then I had to come back on the Thursday. You can imagine that waiting. That's a terrifying
to
wait.
be called up to the stand.
And to be in the same room as him for the first time. So the next day I waited nearly all day until the last half hour. So that's what he did in the last half hour, was tell me he had the binder full, show me the two photos I'd never seen before, and then that was it for the day, and it was the long weekend. You're not allowed to talk to anyone about what's happening. You're not allowed any support from your lawyers, because that's the way it works in the criminal system. So I was left alone for 3 days to go home and know or wonder what is in that binder. And there were two things already I'd never seen before. So they were the worst 3 days. But I just knew I didn't want to go back and be in the room again. That barrister was so aggressive, and being in the same room as the man was not good for me. So I went and did it remotely after that point, and they brought me in a therapy dog, this beautiful chocolate lab, and my husband took a photo of me. It's the saddest photo you've ever seen, just on the floor with this poor lab. The lab's looking at the camera like, I know I'm a therapy dog, but this chick's too much. Like, this is beyond the call.
So
I want a rose.
I want some chum.
Was Rowan around in that time too? Like those 3 days? Like, was he there with you?
He was outside the court. He wasn't allowed in.
He wasn't, okay.
But he was waiting for me every time. He was as solid as a rock. I've just never seen someone so... He never faltered, and he knew how to be there for me in a way that I didn't even know I needed him to be. So, every pile of shit has a positive to it.
Is that the saying?
It is now.
I'm trying
You
to
never heard
think.
that one?
It's a classic.
What's the positive in a pile of shit? I guess you could find something in there, like a lolly
nut?
or something. A nut. Yeah.
Hopefully wrapped. Yeah.
Sorry. Yes. Every pile of shit has a positive.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Brian wants to promise every cloud has a silver lining.
Yeah.
And I think for me, it was falling in love with Rowan in a new way. You know, that he was able to be there for me. Because I know for me, if he was going through something for 4 years, I'd be like, can you just stop with this, Rowan? I don't like it when you're upset. Whereas he just was always like, I'm here. He has this way of not taking on. If he's sad, I'm sad. Whereas if I'm sad, he's just able to be there for me. And I know he obviously felt a lot of the things that was hard for him, but he's just better at compartmentalizing, I think. And anyway, he was awesome.
I had the great privilege of meeting him very quickly last week, and I felt this. It's like some people, you meet them and I loved him instantly, and I thought what an incredibly great person he is. And I would just want to ask how he was throughout the whole thing. But I completely understand what you're saying. Do you think he had moments where it really started to challenge his mental health as well, or was he just stoic the whole way through? Or
The whole way.
Wow.
Stoic. I never saw. I think the day the defamation case was finally abandoned and it was over, I think everyone expected me to be joyful or something, but I just felt like a zombie and I felt really numb, and this thing was over, but it hadn't really finished. It just was abandoned halfway through. And I think that's the first time I saw Rowan break down, because I think he was probably hugely relieved. And yeah, he'd carried it and me, and some days our baby, you know, when I couldn't, some days you just can't get up, but when you have a baby, you have to. And yeah, he showed a resilience that, in terms of that, I've never seen anything like it.
frightfully handsome as well.
I know.
Well, he sounds great.
He's absolutely gorgeous, Josh, you should say.
I want to meet this guy.
I actually went online and tried to Google, like, after I met him, he was wearing this great jacket, and I just wanted to find out where he got it from.
jacket.
Yeah.
I'll steal it for you.
Oh no,
Oh.
he looks great in that. He's got it. Anyway.
Guys, he in some really low moments in life, he has turned to this podcast, and it made a significant difference in his life when he was having a rough time. And he reads any book you recommend, or, you know, he just loves you guys. So the pleasure was all his meeting you the other day.
It became mine very quickly.
Shopping for a jacket.
Yeah.
I've never had this before in this, like, in the history of this podcast, but I'm finding it hard to not be present. I've never been more present for anything, but just to work out where to go and what to say. And I'm so unbelievably moved by everything you've said and the journey you've been on. And I'm usually, during every single interview I've ever done, I'm like, in my head, sort of just, there's a small part of my brain that's going, where's this interview going to? Where do we want to stop off here? I don't actually, to be really honest, I'm not really sure what to say now with everything you've shared. You're the bravest person I've ever met. You're incredible. And that's all I really have in my brain to say to you right now, because I can't formulate proper questions. I just love you, and you're incredible. I think you're incredible. And you talked about the heart racing before. I feel like a lot of people will listen to this with that, and those people will draw strength from you. And what a gift.
I hope so.
What a gift.
All we've got is each other, and that's why this podcast is so amazing. Like,
No, sorry. We're talking about you. Yeah. We're talking about you. Thank you.
I kind of want to hear her out. She was leading somewhere really good. Let her go, Hugh.
but it's true. All we've got is human connection, and that's what you're giving, and I'm here to share mine. And I'm so, as I said, I'm very honoured.
I mean, I didn't mean to end the interview there. That wasn't what I was doing.
That's it. I'm leaving.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to.
Well, I guess it's like, I mean, you're because that 4 years or that period, that is like, that isn't who you are. Like I think that has been, like that has, the narrative in the media has like put you in this role of like the woman who spoke out, and that is a big part of obviously who you are, and it's an incredible thing, to put it mildly. But like, so now that you're sort of like through relatively, I know it still continues in certain ways, but like where, like it always feels weird when I have a friend on the podcast because I'm talking to them as if I don't know them. But like what do you want to do now? Like what do you, like, I just feel like you could do so many things. I just wonder what you're.
I honestly, what I want is to do nothing.
Yeah.
I feel
Great
exhausted, and I feel that carrying on has been a burden, and I want to take piano lessons, and I want to take tennis lessons, and I don't want to work so hard, and I like my ultimate goal. And again, what was that beautiful saying? Every shit has a positive.
It's like silver lining.
Silver turd. Oh no, I forget my silver turd. Just that it put real focus that what we need in life is to be happy. What we should strive for is to have a happy life, and that, well, not me. That's where I'm at. I want to have
what's a happy life for you though?
I feel not being so busy, not trying so hard to show that I'm not a broken human, just being able to
exist.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
I think people should go to, so True Stories.
True Story. Yeah.
Sorry, True Story.
Yeah, that's right. People get that wrong all the time. That's right. It's True Story.
True Story.
Let's get the branding right for once.
And I just feel like having heard this and learned how incredibly courageous and selfless you are, I think people should also just get a little reminder of how talented you are. And I think that is a great example. True Story, Hamish and Andy episode.
Oh, I forget now, but it's the one about Phil. Story about Phil.
Look it up and just enjoy how fucking great you are at what you do as well. I think,
and
just so people don't forget.
You ever get a chance to see Christie on stage in one of your like one woman shows or in those Oscar Wilde, like anything, you have to go. Trust me. Yeah.
Or where are you doing your tennis lessons? So you can go and watch that.
The piano lessons.
Well, I've never done either before, so give me a year. Actually, that was my New Year's resolution, and I haven't done either. See, this is the thing. I've had no time. When you have a kid and you work, there's no time for the shit you want to do in life. So that's my goal. Come on. I just want a bloody tennis lesson, for God's sake.
And do nothing.
Just want to hit an ace and then lay down.
One of those very popular activity, ace and lie down. Well, Christie, just cannot honestly thank you enough. I'm so glad that you came here today and to talk, and I just love you so much.
Me too. Love you guys. You guys are awesome. Thanks for having me.
I feel like I want to, when like a footballer plays their 350th game and they like get on the people's shoulders and cheer. I think we should do that to Christie, just out of the building. Just cheer her out.
All right. Limber up, boys.
Thanks, Christie.
Thanks, Christie. Well, we didn't carry her out.
We didn't carry her out. Yes, that's true.
We wanted to, we didn't.
Just to break the fourth wall, we did not carry her out, unfortunately. Oh, actually, we should have just said we did carry her out. That's a pretty momentous occasion. Imagine that.
What does that mean? I always
momentous.
No. Break the fourth wall.
Oh, it's where so the fourth wall. I'll try and quickly explain this. So like in sitcoms, like think of a sitcom, and there's it's like Seinfeld, for example. You can see 3 walls of the apartment in Seinfeld, but you can't see that fourth wall where the TV is.
Ah,
That's where that's where the cameras are.
what a saying.
So to break the fourth wall means to spin the camera around and show the fourth, which is behind the scenes.
Yeah, okay.
So it's to admit that, there are cameras here. So
Sorry for breaking our wall.
Yeah, sorry for breaking that fourth wall that didn't exist. Yes, but yeah, God, Christie Whelan Browne. Isn't she great?
Yeah.
I already was such a fan of her work, and I've as an avid watcher of Mad as Hell, I think she's incredible in that. What I didn't expect was how much I would like her as a person.
Yeah, what did you expect? I expected to dislike her pretty severely. And
No.
She surprised me.
Let me clarify that.
She seems rude. She seems like a bad person.
Sorry, Christy. No, what I meant is that when you see someone who is that good at their job and that talented and that incredible, when you meet them in person, you expect there to be some kind of them to feel so far above you in their abilities and their world and their skill set. She was so lovely and warm and humble and just a joy to be around that I didn't expect it to be such a relaxing, fun, enjoyable experience because I hold her so high on a pedestal with her abilities. And
I think part of that is when she talked about her reasons for not wanting to go over to LA and go into the whole Hollywood system. I mean, as a guy, I obviously don't need to think about the same things that a woman would have to think about. But that was I found that very enlightening, and also so impressive, I guess, or cool to have that sort of foresight to know that that's what you're going to be facing. Do you really want to go through the rigmarole of being judged like that? I wouldn't want to be. That'd be horrible.
Yeah.
And I'm a guy. Imagine being a woman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an incredible amount of self-knowledge and sort of self-respect.
Yeah.
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 I mean, the thing it was an incredible conversation, and I've never had a conversation like that ever before. But for some reason, the thing I sort of want to talk about off the back of that conversation was the line that just probably made me laugh the most. I think her line was, "Every pile of shit has a positive in it," or something like that. Because it made me laugh a lot. And then I was just reflecting on it since, and I just thought, gosh, it's a really, I mean, I'm not saying thank God it happened, but she's been able to look back on it and seen her relationship go to a whole new level with Rowan because of the support he's offered her over the 5 years and continues to offer her, and the strength that he provided her.
Yeah.
And I think that's a small part. It's a very small positive in it all.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's a big positive, but when you look at everything she's been through, and it actually reminded me of, one of the key characteristics of being resilient is positivity and positive emotion. I would have talked about this before, but Dr. Barbara Fredrickson found back in 2001 that in her research in New York 20 odd years ago, that the most common characteristic amongst resilient people was people who still find reasons to smile, they still find ways to laugh, and they still seek joy even though they're going through such heartache. And I think looking for positive in a part. There's a
pile
positive
of shit.
Yeah. I think that's kind of like...
I'm surprised you can't get the saying right. It's such a well-known saying. It rolls off the tongue to me.
The other thing I was thinking about that was just that I was listening to, and I know everyone's probably sick of me talking about gratitude, but I can't help but think about...
Snooze. Here we go again. That uber helpful stuff about gratitude. Go on then. Bloody fact-based stuff. Can't stand it.
I would say, looking back on COVID, I had a similar thing, and I'm not comparing my experience of COVID to what Christie's been through. Far from that. It's just reminded me of her dealing with something which is difficult. I remember having a moment during COVID of thinking, I'm not saying thank God for COVID, but if it wasn't for COVID, this wouldn't have happened in my life. And the realization that I've had, and I've definitely told you this before, Josh, was that if in 2019, if you said to me, are you grateful for your mum and dad? I would have said, what a ridiculous question. Of course I'm grateful for mum and dad.
I'm thinking, no, of course not. Of course not, obviously. But now I am.
I would have said, of course I am. But COVID made me realise I was nowhere near grateful enough. And I think it was, soon after Elsie was born on the 29th of January in 2020.
It took longer than it should have.
I did pause way too long. I was actually trying to work out when Charlie, in that sentence, I was trying to work out Charlie's date of birth because it was like 5 days afterwards.
Yeah, 6th.
Yeah,
It's
6th,
the 6th, but 7 days later, yeah.
There's something I really enjoy about people forgetting things that they have to know.
Yeah.
Like there's something quite funny about that.
Well, yeah, Charlie was due on the 11th, and I always go 11th, 6th. And I like nearly get it wrong every time, and I'm terrified of getting it wrong, especially in front of Soph.
Because getting I know this is a little bit of a tangent, but there is something so funny because, like, of course, it makes no difference to your love for Elsie whether you remember her birthday or not. But there's this intense shame that goes with forgetting her birthday. Oh. Like, really, I mean, of course, you should remember, but it doesn't actually matter.
No,
but it is funny.
Speaking of things you should remember, last night I had the football last night, the Queensland football, and I was standing in the change rooms with a guy whose name I definitely know and I should definitely know.
Yeah.
And someone came up and I had to do an introduction and I introduced the other guy and then this guy should definitely know his name. I just panicked and I put my arm on his shoulder and went, "This is my main man." He's definitely not my main man.
Yeah.
He'd been like, "What? I'm not his main man."
Yeah.
It was unbelievably awkward.
I don't think I've ever heard you use that phrase before.
My main man.
It would have rolled off the tongue pretty poorly.
He would have felt great. I'm his main man.
I reckon he felt sorry for me. He was like, "Oh gosh, I'm his main man." This man does not have many friends because we're not.
That's why if I ever do have a kid, I'm going to do the world a favour and call them Mateo. So it's like mate for short. So it's like, "Oh, mate. Hey, mate, how you going?" So no one has to remember their name.
Oh, dear. Anyway, so Elsie born on the 29th of January in 2020, and very soon after that went into lockdown. Mum and Dad spent so much time at our house helping out, and I remember probably about we went into lockdown soon after both Charlie and Elsie were born, and I think it was about September in 2020. I think everyone, especially in Melbourne during COVID, had a moment like this where I think Penny had made dinner for us and we're sitting down and Benji threw his meal across the table. It went all over Elsie. She was crying, then he was crying, and I looked up to Penny expecting that we were both jumping up together to clean up the mess and try and sort it out. And she put her head down and she just said, "I can't." She said, "I just can't do this anymore." And she was so defeated by it all. And I remember, Penny had been, I had a permit to come to work every day. Penny had not been out of the house in, I think it was like 6 or 7 months at that point. I mean, they let us out of lockdown for about 45 minutes, I think it was, in June, July in 2020. But Penny was just, like so many people, she was just so defeated from it all. And I just remember having this really strong feeling, and people might be familiar with this, but I had this strong feeling of just, I just wish my mum and dad were here right now. You know, some adults, you get it as an adult occasionally when times are just really tough and it's just too much. I just want mum and dad. And I remember later that night, lying in bed, having a much more profound thought of, I am so glad I've had that realisation now before it's too late. I'm so glad because if it wasn't for COVID, again, I'm not saying thank God for COVID, but if it wasn't for COVID, it wouldn't be until it was too, wouldn't be, many years down the track when they're not around and I'm going, I wish they were here. So I've had that realisation now and I feel so much more, when mum and dad are around, I'm so much more present than I used to be and so much more, I'm just realising in that moment, I'm just thinking, gosh, I'm so lucky. I'm so lucky.
It kind of reminds me, it's sort of in the ballpark of what Ben Shuri said in his episode, which was that like he loves it when things go wrong. And he wasn't talking about COVID or anything like that, but he loves it when things go wrong because it's an opportunity for change. An opportunity to change or to change something. It's an opportunity to kind of look at what the situation is and change it if it's going wrong. And I love that approach. It's sort of different to what you're saying. It's not necessarily gratitude, but I guess it is kind of. But it is that I loved that what he said.
I wonder if, and of course, I'm very wary of us comparing because what Christie's gone through is
for 5 years.
For 5 years, and what she went through of experiencing what she experienced in the first place is I can't imagine. But I do feel like when I've gone through things that are traumatic in my life, there's like a shrinking effect where I feel like the world shrinks a bit and I'm focused. I only have the choice to focus on a few things and it kind of makes you select what are the really important things to focus on. That's my own experience of it.
So what do you mean? Like what have you got?
I mean, COVID, to use the COVID thing, like had so many things going on and so much, as everyone does, like this really busy world that we all sort of have running all the time. That happened and it was a tough thing to go through, but it really shrunk everything down to a few things like my family, this show, and some friends. That was kind of it.
Yeah.
And by being forced to just focus on some very small, not small things, small in comparison to all the things I was spreading my energy and thinking about, made me really appreciate and value those things more. And I felt like leaning into the gratitude that I have those things is the thing that is the silver lining of that for me. Of that pile of shit. But it was because it was forced upon me that I was like, either I can not be appreciative of these things, or now it's they've revealed themselves, what are the most important things in my life.
Yeah, I think that gratitude gives you enormous, and when something goes wrong, I think you get a lot of perspective on your life and what really matters. And I remember actually during COVID, again, I remember listening to Sam Harris, your main man.
My mate.
Podcaster Sam Harris. Yeah.
Yeah.
A guy I listen to a lot, yeah.
Yeah, doctor or professor or doctor or?
He'd be, I think he's a neuroscientist. So would that be not doctor? I think he's just Sam Harris.
He's just
with
Sam Harris.
Probably a lot of letters after his name.
Smart man.
Okay, Mr. Sam Harris.
Yeah.
Listen to Mr. Sam Harris from his podcast. He's a neuroscientist, and he said that, I remember during COVID, I was listening to his podcast, and he's talking about how he practices gratitude, and I thought, that makes me feel good that someone much smarter than me practices gratitude and talks about why it's important. And he said the way I practice it is I wait till I'm extremely stressed or worried or anxious about something, and in that moment I stop and I ask myself, what's not happening to me right now? And what is not happening to me right now? And I remember thinking,
oh, wow,
that's a bit of a negative way of doing it. And then he said the example, he said, I was on the way to a really important meeting the other day and I was really late and I was getting really stressed. And I thought, well, hang on, no, what's not happening to me right now? I'm safe. I'm not in a war-torn country, which many people around the world can't say right now. He said, I'm not on the way to the hospital to visit a loved one. And I remember thinking, yeah, it's a bit negative just to wait till something goes wrong and then just... But the very next day, I was running late to a presentation for the Resilience Project. I had a permit to go to the studio and record these talks. And I was in the car being really stressed about it. There's no traffic, so I had no excuse. I was like, how have I done this? And I thought, no, this is exactly Sam Harris's example, which I thought I'd never do because it's so negative. But I did it, and I couldn't believe the perspective it brought to me. I remember actually thinking, I'd received an email that morning. I was from a doctor who had met in Mumbai back in 2013, who still keeps in touch occasionally. I love the people I met in India who have been educated in international school. Their way of communicating is very formal English. It's beautiful. But he would say, to my dear and kind friend Hugh, I hope this email does find you well. It's really beautiful. But he sent me an email that morning. And the email said, a very, very sad day here in India. Today we have lost 350,000 people to COVID. Oh. And he said, on the way to the hospital today at Mumbai, he said, I saw something which I'll never forget. He said there was a queue 300 metres long to get into the hospital, and a fight had broken out in the queue between two families. There was one oxygen tank in the queue, and it was life or death for these two families for a loved one, and they were literally fighting over this one oxygen tank. And I just thought, I'm late for a talk. I'm not queuing up to get into hospital, but I don't have a loved one I'm not fighting for their life. I remember, and then I was thinking about, I'm not on the way to hospital to visit a family member who's sick in hospital. And if I was, and someone magically appeared and said, Hugh, if you want, you can have this situation, or you could be running late for a presentation, I would say, I'll run late for a presentation every day for the rest of my life to avoid this. So, and automatically it just gave me so much perspective on my life. And I think that's one of the great things that gratitude does. And again, we are absolutely not comparing COVID to what Christie went through, very different scenarios. But I do look at, the perspective she's gained on her relationship with Rowan. Perhaps she wouldn't have reached that insight if it wasn't for what she's going through. And I think for anyone listening who's going through something really tough right now, I'm not saying answering the question, what's not happening, that might seem like we're minimising what you're going through. We're not doing that at all either. But I do think by answering that question, you can find some insight into your life, and you can find some perspective as well, which may or may not be helpful. It's just an idea.
Yeah, it certainly puts the 90-minute wait for the Spider-Man ride at Tokyo Disney into perspective. That's for sure.
I'm amazed you waited 90 minutes.
Yeah.
That is incredible.
You have to wait. Was
it worth it?
Yeah, it was good. It was good. Anyway, yeah.
Sounds like a good note to end on for this
Yeah.
episode.
I don't know if it's necessarily worth saying or not, but
I wanted to combine, maybe we'll cut this out, but I wanted to combine the birthday thing and your gratitude for mum and dad and see if you can guess their birthdays.
I do know the birthdays.
Okay.
go on.
Dad is the 24th of August and Mum is the 12th of September.
I would have gotten that wrong.
Or maybe you're wrong.
Maybe I'm wrong.
What do you
I
think
thought Dad
it
was
is?
the 23rd, but it could be 20. No, you're right. It's 24th. It's 24th. Yeah. Anyway, we should cut this
Right.
bit out.
No, you tried to trip me up and you followed over. And we'll get that in.
Hugh's going to finally learn how to edit.
Anyway,
To
I love you,
protect
Dad.
that.
Love you, Mum.
I love you too, mum and dad.
Well, we also love Christie Whelan Browne. Christie, thank you for coming on the podcast. It means a lot to us, and I think it will mean a lot to a lot of people listening. So that was a good one.
Thanks, Christy.
Hugh, it's Ryan. Just off that interview with Christie, I just had an idea. That quote that she said, every pile of shit has a positive in it, I reckon we really need to do something with that because it is actually quite inspiring. So I was thinking, what about like an Imperfects treasure hunt for everyone? Okay, where we secretly hide real piles of shit all around Australia, like thousands of them, thousands and thousands of piles of shit in pubs and parks and in people's gardens, at schools, wherever, and we give out clues, and the lucky people who can solve the clue or the riddle, when they find the pile of shit, they dig inside and of course they find a positive in it. Yeah? And that positive might be a $2 coin or a lollipop or, I don't know, something fun like that. So anyway, I think if we're going to do it, we need to jump on it pretty quickly because we need to start gathering the piles, obviously. So call me back ASAP. It's Ryan Shelton from the podcast.
To call back, press 2-2. To replay message, press 1. To reply.
The Imperfects is hosted and produced by Hugh Van Cuylenberg, Ryan Shelton, and Josh Van Cuylenberg. Our executive producer is Bridget Northeast. This episode is filmed by Andy Poole and edited by George Martin. The Imperfects is not a licensed mental health service and is not a substitute for professional mental health advice, treatment, or assessment. The advice given in this episode is general in nature, but if you're struggling, please see a healthcare professional or call Lifeline on 131114.
You set the tone and I'll be alright. You set the flame